choosing willows for your basket is a rather complicated topic that I feel like requires a great deal of experience. So I can only give some very, very broad general guidelines to how to do that. But it's important to understand that these are very broad general guidelines and to understand the reasoning behind them, and to not get stuck on the exact numbers that I might say here. So first, we'll talk about some theory of choosing your materials, and then we're actually going to choose materials for our next project together. So I've actually arranged the different parts here by thickness. The base sticks will be the thickest part of your basket, then the stakes, then the waling rods, then the rending rods, and finally the base waver. I've left the handle out for now because it's not very important at the moment. So choosing base sticks for your basket is I think is the easiest part. Basically, they're going to come from the butt ends of your, I want to say longest willow rods, but maybe that's not accurate. They're going to come from the butt ends of the longest willow rods that you're going to work with. You know, if you have like 8-9 feet that are going to be used for handlebars or something like that, then obviously you're not going to use them for base sticks. But if my thickest rods are 7 foot, then the base sticks are going to come from the 7 foot, and the length of the base sticks will always be slightly bigger than the base you think you're going to make, maybe an inch or so from each side. Now the stakes, there are two things that you should think about when choosing stakes. One is that they should be thinner than the base sticks, right? Because if they are thicker or as thick, it's going to be very, very difficult to insert them into the base. Next, you have to think about where the border is going to be. If I think that the border is going to be at that high, at this height, then I have to look at my stakes and ask myself, are they at the right thickness where the border should be? You don't want them to be too thin where you have to turn down a border, or you don't want them to be too thick. Suppose I'm making a tray that's about this high and I'm using 7 foot stakes, then the stakes are going to be very, very thick where I have to turn down the border, and it might be too difficult to make. So that's about choosing stakes. Now, your waling rods are going to be slightly thinner than your stakes, or sometimes they might be as thick at the very butt end. But as a general guideline, they should be thinner. Now, you should also think about the length of your waling rods, but this is something that we'll learn in the future. We're not going to talk about it right now. Your rending rods are, once again, as a general guideline, going to be thinner than your waling rod and your stakes, of course. Your stakes must be thicker than your weavers, whether it's the waling rods or the rending rods. And finally, the base weavers are going to be the thinnest rods. This is at least how I like to work. So let's say my longest willow rods are 6 foot. Then my base sticks are obviously going to come from the butt ends of the 6 foot right? Then the stakes are also going to be 6 foot. Once again, very generalized guidelines. They might also be 5 foot sometimes, but let's say for our matters, for our purposes, they should be 6 foot. Now our whaling rods, let's say they will be 5 foot, and our rending rods will be for 5 foot. Also, we have our base weavers, which to me will always be 2 to 4 feet. So that's just a very broad, very crude way to look at it. I might actually use 6 feet, 6 foot for the stakes and for the whaling rods and for the rending rods, but they're going to be different thicknesses of 6 foot. Let's say my longest willows are 7 foot, then the base sticks might come from the 7 foot. Stakes, once again, might be 6 or 7 foot, depends on what you're doing. Then the whaling rods will probably be 6, could also be 7. Then 5 or 6 for your rending rods. And finally, and for the base weavers, I will actually stick with 2 to 4 foot. I will almost always use 2 to 4 feet for my base weavers. I really like to use some leftover weavers for my base. And many times for the very beginning of my base, I might use some very short leftovers like this, and use maybe 2, maybe 4 or 6 just for the beginning of my base, and then I'm going to progress to switch to 3 and 4 foot. So we have our general guidelines in terms of length and thicknesses, but what about quantities? So let's say I'm should we write it down? No, I don't think we should write it down. Let's say I want to make a base of 3 by 3, right? Base of 3 by 3. Obviously, I'm going to need 6 base sticks for this. But when I need 6 base sticks, I never prepare just 6 base sticks. I would probably prepare 7 or 8. Some they might get ruined or be damaged. Now the stakes for 3 by 3 base, we're going to need 24 stakes. Our base is going to have 12 base sticks, and we're going to add stakes 2 to 1, so we're going to need 24 stakes. So these first 2 parts are very easy to calculate. Of course, if I need 24 stakes, once again, I'm not just going to prepare 24 stakes, I'm going to prepare more than that. Now, whaling rods are a bit more complicated to calculate how many you need, because you have to know what lengths they are, in relation to the diameter of the basket you're planning. You have to know what types of whaling bands you're preparing, how many whaling bands you're going to have in your basket. So this is not a very simple topic, and we'll talk about this in the future. Let's just let it go for now. Rending rods are very easy, because if I have 24 stakes, I'm also going to have 24 rending rods for French rending, of course, in a single section. So if my basket is going to be a single section of French rending, then I'm going to need 24 rending rods. Of course, I will prepare more than that. If I know that I'm going to make 2 sections, then I'm going to have 48, or perhaps 1 section of doubled weavers. That's also 48. Now the base weavers, that might require some experience, but it's not as complicated as the Waling rods. I can simply look at a base I have laying around, and quite easily I can count pretty much approximately how many willow rods I used for this base. This is something that I think this is something that you very easily or very quickly figure out as you start progressing. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Now let's choose together the materials for our next work, which will be the beginner's course.